In the mid-1990s, we did not have a mandate holder then, and we did not have a protocol then. And it was the members of civil society and mainstream organizations, CSO organizations, that were agitating to have something developed for the women. And during our training courses, we were able to have participants develop what is it that that has not been put in the African Charter to take into consideration the lives of women. And with the assistance and collaboration of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, in the persons of Germaine Barechako, the secretary then, and Dr. Emmanuel Victor Dankwa, who was the chair, Commissioner Dankwa, and we were able to organize these courses. And the outcomes of those courses, when we looked at them, the chair proposed that we should do a consolidate all the outcomes of those working groups. And it was interesting, after we put them all together, we officially handed them over to the commission. And this is what they took as a core of the information that later, with different contributions, became the Maputo Protocol. But as we were talking about the protocol, we were also proposing from the forum that there needs to be a rapporteur that will be in charge, a mechanism that will be in charge of women's rights.
As we celebrate 25 years since the establishment of the African Commission's Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa, it's a good time to look back at the foundational period. And to understand that period properly, we have to take note of the fact that the African Charter, in fact, does not provide for special rapporteurships at all. So it is to the credit of the Commission that it, in 1994, established its first rapporteurship. It was an act of innovation and it was very progressive. But it is also understandable because that first rapporteurship was on extrajudicial killings and arbitrary executions. It relates obviously to the incidents, the happenings in Rwanda, and that special rapporteurship then became the first to be established to address that particular issue of concern. After that, we have the special rapporteur on prisons and conditions of detention in Africa, and the third then becomes this, the special rapporteurship on the rights of women. The decision to actually establish it was already taken in 1996, but the operationalization, the actual appointment of the special rapporteur was only in 1999 when Commissioner Onziel Nelenga was appointed. Now, why and to what extent were there some resistances against or curbing the speedy establishment of this rapporteurship? I think the issues here first is institutional. The first rapporteurship, the one on extrajudicial killings, really was in principle a great idea, but in practice quite problematic. There were all kinds of issues around the terms of reference, modalities of deployment, insurance, insecurity, safety. In fact, it was so bad that one of the commissioners once referred to that special rapporteurship as a rapporteur zero. I heard it myself at that session. Anyway, so that kind of stilted a bit of the progress. The second issue, I think, is also around the debate that was ongoing at the time that influenced also the appointment of or the establishment of the rapporteurship on women. And that was the debate about whether a rapporteur should be an independent expert from outside the Commission or whether it should be someone who is a commissioner, him or herself. That debate was resolved in favor of, yes, it should be a commissioner, but I think that also, caused some form of a delay, at least in that process of establishing the rapporteurship. And the last, which also spilled over into the period of the work of the rapporteur has to do with the Maputo Protocol. Now, although the rapporteurship is much more broad than the Maputo Protocol, from the outset, the establishment of the rapporteurship was kind of closely linked to the idea that there should be a treaty that also focuses specifically on the rights of women, a protocol to the African Charter. And although, there was momentum within the Commission towards this, and there was kind of a women's rights movement thinking, how should such a treaty look like and what role can the Special Rapporteur play? At the same time, almost in parallel, there was a process at the AU level, at the Commission, at the Addis Ababa level, if you like, to draft a treaty speaking specific to harmful practices and violence against women. So there were kind of two fully fledged treaties almost in parallel, and through the rapporteurship's, mandate, those also had to be brought together. So that was another factor, in a sense, not only impeding perhaps the momentum, but also the functioning in the initial years of the rapporteurships. But in 1999, the rapporteurship is formally then brought into life with the appointment of the Special Rapporteur. And I can say that as a center, we are very privileged, very fortunate to have been a small part of that. At the time, the center had what was called a gender unit at the time, and people like Elise Delport and Boogie Kotswane had been quite instrumental in the work of the African Union, even at those early years. And through them, the center played also its small part in the landscape change that was brought about through this quite momentous occasion of getting the Special Rapporteurship formalized and the first rapporteur appointed. Once the Special Rapporteur was up and running, certainly one of the most important first tasks was to work towards the adoption, obviously then the entry into force, the implementation of a substantive protocol to the African Charter that further clarifies, sets out the rights of women, that later became known as the Maputo Protocol. We as a center had been very fortunate to, over the years, work closely with a number of special rapporteurs. The way in which the center, I think, had been able to support the special rapporteur can come, I suppose, in 5 dimensions. Briefly sketch those. The first is through technical assistance. Especially in the beginning years, the special rapporteur support at the level of the Secretariat of the Commission could be enhanced. And the center stepped in to strengthen, enhance the, if you like, secretarial capacity of the Special Rapporteur. We designated usually an alumna of our Human Rights and Democratization in Africa program to serve, in a sense, then as a special designated research assistant to the Special Rapporteur. And that person conducted research, assisted with logistics, and just basically beefed up the capacity.
The Center for Human Rights has over the years been instrumental in supporting the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on the rights of women in Africa, particularly through the Women's Rights Unit, which during my doctoral research, I was able to be a member of and support the mandate of the Special Rapporteur.
The second is related to state reporting. Now, as we know, the main obligation essentially of states under the Maputo Protocol is to submit its initial and periodic report, receive concluding observations, and improve the realization of women's rights on that basis. The third is related to soft law standard setting. Now, Article 18 of the African Charter notoriously mentions women, but doesn't really elaborate anything further. The Maputo Protocol's function was to extend our substantive understanding of what the rights of women are, to be understood as being, but still, the Maputo Protocol also was open-ended and needed further norm clarification. So the idea came that we should assist the center, the rapporteur, in guiding states more closely on what exactly certain provisions, innovative, important provisions in the Maputo Protocol really mean. The fourth layer or dimension of this collaborative energy between the Commission and its rapporteur and the center and other civil society organizations, obviously, was through education and training. And that is related to the last of these dimensions, research scholarship. I think this has culminated quite illustratively in 2023 in the publication of a commentary on the Maputo Protocol. So through the Pretoria University Law Press.
As the current Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa, I recognize the fact that I'm standing on the legacy of very formidable women who had handled this mechanism before me. As a result, when I took on the mantle, I recognized that I needed to hold on to that baton that was passed on to me and ensure that I carried the discourse further. So upon being sworn in Dakar in 2021, I sponsored the first resolution dealing with the plight of women during armed conflict, recognizing the massive violation of women's rights within armed conflict. Following that, also, taking on from the work that was done by the immediate predecessor Commissioner Manuela, I worked very closely with her and together with the former Special Rapporteur to actually champion the adoption of a joint general comment with the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child and on other violation that actually is a menace for women within the continent, and that's the joint general comment on female genital mutilation. And this was adopted successfully by both mechanisms, that is the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child and the African Commission. With regard to emerging issues also, taking on from the work that has been done for the adoption of the Maputo Protocol, we also passed a resolution 522 on digital violence against women. And this was a resolution that has been very instrumental and innovative resolution, recognizing the fact that the protocol does not deal into the details of emerging issues, but covers all forms of violence. So we used that resolution to address and to urge states to work on issues relating to digital violence against women. Currently, one of the most pivotal projects I'm working on, which I believe will have a great impact on the women of the continent after 35 ratification of the Maputo Protocol, is the model law on the implementation of the Maputo Protocol. I believe this model law will be very instrumental in guiding states for the implementation and the domestication of the Maputo Protocol, taking the discourse to the next level, because we cannot keep on talking about ratification. We will now talk about domestication and implementation. And I believe that this will help the states to effectively implement the Maputo Protocol. This model law actually is very important, and I will call on all stakeholders to join me in putting our hands together to work on it.
As a judge of 40 years standing, I had the unfortunate occasion of having to listen to women being asked to justify their contribution in building matrimonial property. It was so embarrassing because as a woman, I know that whether working or not, I actually did contribute to the building of matrimonial property. But this was the questions which were asked to women during divorces or separations. And they needed to establish in one way or the other that though they were not working, they had to contribute to matrimonial property. We see that the stage we have today is not the same as that of yesteryears. A few days ago, yesterday, we had the opportunity of listening to the history of the Maputo Protocol. We need to get the young ones to listen to this history and see the resilience with which the older generation embrace the struggle for women's rights. And it's only in so doing that we can assure continuity and actually transform the lives of women on the continent.
J'arrivais, le protocole de Maputo était déjà entré en vigueur. Il s'agissait donc pour la rapporteure que je suis d'aller dans les pays, d'interagir avec les acteurs étatiques pour les pousser à plus de ratification. Et pendant mon mandat de 2 années au niveau de la Commission africaine, j'ai été ou rapporteur, ou vice-présidente, ou présidente. Mais dans toutes les missions, les 42 pays que j'ai visités, il y avait toujours dans les termes de référence de mes missions une partie relative aux droits des femmes, faire le point de la situation des droits des femmes, qu'est-ce qui a évolué dans le pays, qu'est-ce qui n'a pas bougé, Pourquoi cela n'a pas bougé? Et terminer par une conférence avec les ONG, rencontre avec les ONG pour savoir effectivement quelles sont les stratégies et quelles sont les recommandations qu'on devrait intégrer dans le rapport de l'État, à l'effet effectivement de pouvoir en faire également l'évaluation.
I've worked with 3 distinct special rapporteurs on the rights of women. In terms of what the impactful interventions that I've had during my tenure in the mandates of the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women, there's quite a few, but what has been most impactful to me, reason being that I've been involved in the process, I was part of the process, is the rejection of the proposed repeal of the Women's Amendment Act of 2015 FGM law. So I was part of the process from the beginning when, during all the debates in Parliament, when the Commission got involved in issuing press statements, urgent letters of appeal, together with the Special Rapporteur on FGM from the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and also together with the Country Rapporteur of the Gambia and the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women. We had press statements and urgent appeals back to back. But what was really impactful to me, and which I think made a huge difference, was the roundtable that was convened here in the Gambia by the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women, specifically Honorable Commissioner Ramatulai Salanjai, with various stakeholders at the community level. And during that roundtable, we had an ad hoc committee that was established that was in charge of advocacy at various levels at the national level. So both religious at rural areas, in advocacy with community leaders. And I think that led to the results that we had in the end, wherein the repeal was rejected in Parliament. To me, that was a very impactful intervention because while I was not only part of the process, I witnessed the advantages of collaboration between the Commission with the national and international stakeholders.
As we celebrate 25 years of the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa, I believe that one of its biggest challenges overall has been to put the agenda of women's rights on the overall agenda of the African Commission. I believe that one of the biggest challenges that the mandate faces is that on the continent as a whole, we are suffering a lot of challenges when it comes to women's rights issues. But we find that right now, as we go through a regression on the rights of women on the continent, there's a lot of pushback at the moment in terms of the gains that we had gotten on women's rights issues. This creates a challenge in terms of achieving the objectives of the mandate, because now, instead of going about the business of promoting the rights of women, we find that the mandate now has to fight also against the pushback that is coming in.
When I think about the hurdles facing women's rights and gender equality in Africa right now, I think of the fact that we do not yet have universal ratification of the Maputo Protocol. Only 45 out of 55 member states of the African Union have ratified the protocol, and thus we have a gap of 10 countries where women's rights are not fully protected by a normative instrument. Closely related to that is the challenge we have of reservations on the protocol, and the reservations have been placed on critical articles such as Article 6 and 7 on the right to equality in marriage and the family, Article 14 on the right to reproductive health, as well as articles that speak to child marriage and FGM. And really, it means then we have quasi-protection of women's rights, and that child marriage, FGM, inequality in the family, and sexual violence continue to be a challenge for many women across Africa. And we look forward to the next phase. For instance, the mandate is working on a strategy to lift reservations in partnership with Equality Now. of how the mandate can better address the concerns of young women, it takes me back, for instance, using my example to where I was when the mandate was established. In 1998, I was in grade 3, still a child pretty much. And when the Maputo Protocol came into force, I was in grade 8, the last stage of primary school in my country. And then when the Maputo Protocol entered into force, I was in high school. And now I'm here with a voice to advocate for women. I think the intergenerational aspect is quite evident, that we can build on the lessons of the women who came before us. And if they were able to accomplish that when the space was much more smaller and much more conservative, then we can have the audacity to be louder and bolder in our advocacy.
I do believe that the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa can engage young people more in very effective ways by leveraging on the power of social media. We've seen the Gen Zs in Kenya take off the social media platforms, campaigning against femicide with hashtags of End Femicide, KE, Total Shutdown KE. We've also seen instances in the Gambia during the attempt to repeal the anti-FGM law, where activists took on Twitter platforms to amplify the NFGM 220 hashtag. So I think it's a great opportunity or a great platform to leverage on to kind of bridge that gap between older women and younger women. I also believe that it is very much important in engaging local organizations led by young people to get to learn more from these women who have been here before us, who walked so that we could run, to get to understand their perspectives and enhance our capacity as local organizations in various countries so that we can advance women's rights in Africa and beyond.
The mechanism has also had an impact in seeing that more women-led and women-serving organizations are now getting observer status. This has been impactful because it has enabled women and girls from across the continent to present their demands and their issues before the continent without having to be represented by anyone other than themselves. The mechanism can engage with the younger generation of women activists through representation. I think from what we see across the continent, just borrowing from what we are seeing in Kenya, the youth are demanding to be heard. It is time for the youth to be heard and to be meaningfully engaged.
Providing, organizing, and facilitating educational opportunities, the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa can effectively engage with the youth generation and also equips them with the necessary tool and knowledge which enables them to advocate for the rights of women in Africa.
One of the ways that I think the Special Rapporteur for the Rights of Women in Africa can engage the much younger generation of activists, especially in Africa, is to ensure that the gap is bridged between formal institutions like the African Union and grassroots movements or organizations which are led by young activists. Because most of the time you realize that younger activists feel mostly disconnected to formal institutions like the African Union. So if you have mechanisms in place to ensure their inclusion and their engagement to these formal institutions, I feel the connection and also the work and the advocacy and activism is going to feel much more inclusive and better. And so it is extremely great that we're celebrating the anniversary of the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa, which I believe is extremely important, especially as we think about how we mainstream gender as it relates to other mandates of the African Commission, but also within the African human rights system and beyond. And I do think that especially looking at the future of the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa, I do believe that there is potential, especially thinking about better collaboration with civil society, with national human rights institutions, but also particularly important as well with other international and regional human rights mechanisms, particularly as it relates to pursuing and advancing women's rights within the continent, but also globally as well.
We celebrate with the Commission, with the Rapporteur, these 25 years. I think I can honestly say as someone who's worked with the Commission in many dimensions and ways, I am convinced that this rapporteurship is one of the most significant and influential aspects of the Commission's work. We see this in the way in which the Maputo Protocol has shifted and shaped the landscape. If we just take two examples of how the Maputo Protocol work has led the way, it was through the Maputo Protocol that the first general comment was adopted, and that led to the adoption of many other subsequent comments. So the Special Rapporteur was pivotal in shaping that whole trend, if you like, and also the idea of guidelines to specifically speak to how does a state report on a particular issue. That started also with the guidelines on the Maputo Protocol through the Special Rapporteur, and we then see later on subsequent guidelines being developed also on other articles. So in this and in many other ways, I think the Special Rapporteur on the rights of women in Africa had been trend-setting, had been influential. We look back in pride and in privilege to have been involved together with the Special Rapporteur in this work. And we certainly anticipate and look forward to the many great things and the significant impact that this rapporteur's work would still have in the future.